KC9VKV calling CQ on 7187.
KC9VKV, this is Whiskey 4, November, Charlie, Quebec.
Roger, roger there, Whiskey 4, November, Charlie, Quebec. What's the name?
My name is Alpha Lima, Alpha November. I'm in Black Mountain. That's 13 miles east of Asheville.
Roger, what was the name one more time, please?
Allen, Alpha Lima, Alpha November.
Roger, Allen, you took a hit right there when you got to your name. It just, the floor went out and there was nothing. This band is very in and out this morning, like 20 dB shifts, Roger.
Yeah, most goodness, yours is surprisingly consistent. You're consistently 5 to 10 over 9 here. Very great deal, but most of the signals are. So you must have an illegal antenna or something.
You heard that one. Yeah, we do have an illegal antenna. Roger, roger.
Yeah, you've got good audio too. You're talking about the internet. I'm about to go on there for a search. I put dipoles up in trees. No power here or anything, because I'm in pretty dense woods. And I remember reading that there are certain places that even an insulated wire antenna should not touch branches any more than you have to. I believe I heard that it's okay if the branches are fairly close to the feed point, and it's bad if it's towards the ends of the antenna, if you're talking about a resonant antenna. I believe you said that you're an engineer and have web pages and so forth. Do you have any knowledge in that area?
Not an engineer, but have put up a few dipoles. You have, I think, better tuning capabilities when the antenna is working into insulators on either side. When they're running through limbs, it has a way of, well, it's going to shift when there's a rain or snow. That loading on the tips of the dipole is going to get greater when it gets wet or when it gets snow accumulation. So with that said, if possible, I would try to keep insulators to separate the antenna from the support rope or whatever it is. Now, and I say that from the standpoint of experience, because my 80 meter is a sloper that runs up to the top of a tree, and this tree, my good buddy with a fly cast put it up there the first time, right on the limb that I'm looking for, and I was about 75 feet up in the air on this tree. But the problem is that I need the feed point to be at a particular place, and so therefore I had to pull the antenna on into the tree further than what I would like, and consequently it has never been adjustable to my liking. I've had to run an antenna tuner. That's on 80 meters, and so I'm having to run an antenna tuner on that. The rest of these inverted V's that I've got 3 inverted V's about 35 feet of a tower. I kind of Siamesed some of my middle guy wires and turned them into inverted V's, and so I could get to the ends of those fairly easily, and those are all running about 1.01 to 1. Roger, roger.
Yeah, well, you're certainly very strong here. Of course, I'm using insulated. I'm just using regular. I was using 12, but now I use 14 because I found that the 12 never ever broke. So why not use a cheaper wire? It's easier to work with, the stranded house wire, or whatever type of insulation it has. And of course, I use insulators and everything, but the branches still touch the insulated wire at various places, and they do make a difference, believe it or not, especially when the trees are leaved out. I guess there's more water. Maybe the branches are more conductive when when things are actually growing. And I heard, or I read somewhere, that if it's unavoidable, and in my case it is, because right now I'm talking to you on a 160-meter dipole with open wire line, I managed to clear a pathway for the open wire line, but it's just too much work to do it for 240 foot run or whatever the 160-meter dipole is. For that distance, trees are dying and falling on it, and branches are moving and everything. It's hard to keep it clear. So it's going to be touching some branches, but I do have a choice of which branches, just by changing height. And my understanding, and I don't know where it came from, is that branches that touch, now we're talking branches touching insulated wire, fairly near the center feed point of the antenna, it won't make too much difference. But you don't want to get it out towards the latter 8 wavelengths on each side or something like that. Then it becomes more sensitive. But I've never seen it really confirmed in anything with any authority, and I just thought you might have some input on that. Because I can put the antenna, I use a drone to hang an antenna, and it's this drone I've been flying for 3 years, so I can put an antenna just about anywhere as long as the wind isn't too gusty. And so I can hit the exact notch that I want. And what do you call it? There's a word for it. Anyway, when you fly by camera, that one, not the big HD camera, the useful photography, it's on a gimbal mount and so forth. But the one that you fly with, that one I can look closer. I mean, I can at 100 feet or 110 feet, I can see I can count the spots on a ladybug that's walking on an insulator. I know exactly where I'm putting the antenna, and I am trying to find an optimum place to put this that I use as an all-band antenna since it's open wire fed. So do you think it makes a difference where the branches touch?
Roger, Allen, it does. A dipole antenna at whatever frequency is most sensitive at the ends of the dipole. Like I built Yagis, and Yagis, it's a dipole feed, and elements along the way, and all those elements are most critical at the tips on either side, the high side or the low side. They are most sensitive at the tips of the elements. So the same thing with a wire antenna, a dipole. It's going to be most sensitive at the tips. So if you can avoid branches at the tips, that would be the most ideal thing, and that would render the antenna as close to free space as possible. Roger?
That's what I remembered, but I don't know, I couldn't remember the source of the information, so I didn't know if it was true or not. And I guess that at lower frequencies it's less important, and it's probably more important at the higher frequencies.
Absolutely. You're talking about a limb offering X amount of capacitance, and that capacitance percentage will be less affected at the lower frequencies, like 160 meters. That amount of capacitance is a drop in the bucket to a dipole at 160 meters, whereas at 20 meters, 10 meters, that same capacitance is a major influence in the tuning. Roger?
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Now I'm using this on 10 through 160, although I don't use 160 that much. I don't know, this antenna seems to be a cloud burner. I have a pretty strong signal for a couple of states, but that's about it. I've occasionally, in North California or whatever, but that's unusual. And there aren't, and it's mostly nets or groups of people that, anyway, I just haven't used 160 much, although the conditions have been really great, as good as I can remember for years, in terms of low noise and high signal strength, especially earlier in the year, in the summertime, when usually you think it would be horrible. 160 was amazing, but I don't use it. I primary is 10 through 75, and I am going to raise this antenna. It's a horizontal feed point at about 65 feet, and the antenna is pretty horizontal, although the ground is very rugged. So the actual height above ground varies a lot because some of the slope is 35, 40 degrees. So I don't know what's more important, how far from the ground is, or whether it's straight. And I don't believe in inverted V's unless you're at the higher frequencies. At the lower frequencies. This is W4NCQ. I tend to ramble on here because they don't get, from what you read and from what I've experienced, they don't become directional until you get above a half wavelength. And then you're better off if you're lower than that, which on, say, 75 meters I usually would be. You're going to be omnidirectional, and I have AB'd pretty identical, as much as I can get with this rugged terrain. The apex of an antenna with the same height as a dipole, and the dipole always wins. I've even gone so far as to I support a longer antenna at 3 places, and I'll let the end drop down 45 degrees, and the receive and transmitted signal almost always goes down when you start making a dipole into an inverted V. And if there's noise, atmospheric noise goes up because of the noise having a lot of, I think the reason is that it has a lot of vertical component, and so vertically polarized antennas can be noisier. So I've found that it's very difficult, unless you're talking about phased arrays or something like that, with a dipole type antenna to beat a half-wave dipole, and it's almost always better than an inverted V. But a lot of people don't believe that. Now, if you get the antenna up above a half wavelength, then it's different. That's going to be directional off the sides, and there is the advantage. Anyway, you probably have discovered the same thing. But I'm going to be adjusting my antenna, and I can't fly the drone in cold weather because the plastics that the drones are made out of get really brittle. Also, the battery life is greatly reduced at 32 degrees compared to 70. I don't fly the drone in the winter, but it's getting into antenna hanging time here. W4NC, no, let's see, I wrote the call down. Sometimes I forget. Jim, KC9VKV, W4NCQ.
Roger, Alan. Well, dipoles are finicky. Both, long wire dipoles and inverted V's. I think what I want to try, I've got, these inverted V's for 15, 20, and 40. We're on an inverted V right now. But I think some X's, where you have a dipole running north-south, and you have a dipole running east-west, identical, except different runs, and then into a AB switch, at least, and you can pick and choose. I run on my 10 meter, I run 3 antennas. I run a full wave loop antenna on a rotor, vertical loop antenna on a rotor. I run a stationary 5/8, and then I run a side-mounted quarter wave at about 40 feet on the antenna, and I have a rotary switch, and I'm just constantly playing checkout with with the rotary selector, always you know, on the hottest antenna. And it's just amazing how much incoming shifts from vertical to horizontal, and sometimes it's in between. My loop antenna is driven from the top, and I have, because it's driven from the top, and it's a rectangular, it's 10 foot on the horizontal and 8 foot on the vertical, rectangular square. Well, kind of a dichotomy there, but it's rectangular. 36 foot, I'm using a RG6 tacked to a PVC frame, and that's a 36 foot loop, and driven from the top. So what happens there, as it's looking at a signal, you know, it's broadband receive to the signal, and it's the first 5 feet on either side are horizontal, and then the next 8 feet running down are vertical. So it has a tendency to be active in vertical and horizontal polarization simultaneously. So it tends to resist fades. As it fades from a horizontal to a vertical, it's phasing right from one strong point to the other strong point of the loop. So the loop really does you know, make giant strides as far as reducing the fade if I were just horizontal or just vertical. But sometimes if it's just truly vertical, my 5/8 does real good. And then on the other thing, if neither one of those are catching it, that quarter wave side mount does a good job. So you know, when you have options, that's the thing. And you know, if you have an ABC option, you've got the best of both worlds, Roger.
Yeah, you're talking higher frequencies there, and that's absolutely true, because you're up above a half wavelength, and then you can work with the directivity. And I found that too, that it would be a real advantage, especially if you're a DXer, which I'm not as far as counting number of stations. I like to work DX on a casual basis, and you know, so I'm not really that critical. But yeah, if you get up high, cross dipoles like that, where you can switch back and forth, that's a great way to go. I have very little experience with loops, and the experience I've had, because they're so hard to put up in dense vegetation, my experience has not been very good with a vertical loop. I can get directivity, but and that could be an advantage. But with a horizontal loop, I've never gotten any gain when I've AV'd a dipole with a horizontal loop. Now, they say they're supposed to be low noise. Sometimes I think there's a little less noise, but I don't see a big difference between if we're talking not real high heights, let's say 65 feet, 75 meter resonant dipole filled with coax and a loop. I've never been able to beat the dipole. I found it is very difficult to beat a half-wave dipole, especially if you can get it up sort of high. But that's not from very much experience. Now, vertical loops, the advantage there, of course, would be you get directivity. So that would be a good thing, I guess. I'm not really sure about gain. I haven't tried a vertical loop against the dipole, a broadside dipole, and see if I can get any gain with the loop. But I generally am not crazy about loops or verticals unless you're willing to put in a lot of ground, or you're like over salt water. So, I mean, I've heard some verticals that are exceptionally good, but they're, I mean, just some incredible signals. but they're usually very unusual, like right next to the ocean or some very unusual, or over an iron ore deposit. Very unusual situation. Generally, I found that a dipole that is horizontal dipole, resonant dipole, at the height of the top of the vertical is almost never exceeded by the vertical, and the vertical is usually more noisy. And that includes even low-level situations, DX, except for there have been a few exceptions, but generally, even the low-level stuff is far away. Good dipole up high seems to, especially on the high frequencies, broadside, beat it. So I really am thankful for dipole. I don't understand antennas. I've tried modeling, and I've never had any luck. Probably because of the proximity to so many branches and so forth, all that capacitive coupling and all kinds of problems. So the models are never seem to work that well for me. This is W4NCQ in Black Mountain.
Roger there, Alan. The thing about a vertical loop antenna is with a rotor, so you can rotate it into the field that's incoming for max smoke, is that you will have about 40 to 50 dB nulling rejection off the corners. So if you have somebody with a 50 dB signal that's giving you a hard time, you can pull that antenna, that loop around and null that guy right out. I mean, he is gone. Now the front gain of a loop is only about, let's say maybe 3 dB, something like that. And remember also that the loop is bidirectional, and it is as much going out the back end as it is going out the front end, you know. So there you go there. But like I say, just from the noise standpoint, to give you some kind of example, if I connect my quarter wave antenna that's 40 feet up the tower, I have X amount of noise when I plug that antenna in. Then if I plug in my 5/8, I get about half that noise. And then if I plug in my loop, sometimes it's difficult to even tell that I plugged it in. It's at least half the noise of the 5/8, you know. It is just extremely quiet. Roger.
Yeah, that's if I understand what you're saying there. You want to stay away from vertical polarization as much as possible, unless you're doing it for a specific reason, because you're going to pick up more noise and your signal ratio is going to be off. I am not. I can't rotate a loop here because I don't want to cut down the trees. I mean, just because I don't have any beams up, because I don't want to cut down all the trees that would require. I want to make this look so everything's pretty much, it's that black insulated wire. You can't see any of the antennas, and unless you really know what you're looking for, and that contributes to a little difficulty in hanging. You've got to be able to see the antenna even though you're using the drone. If you could rotate a loop, that's a really nice rejection. 40 or 50 dB. That's amazing. 3 dB. That's really not an enormous deal. There's an antenna that's described in the ARRL antenna book, a modified extended double ZEP. And it's a dipole, but it's single frequency dipole, but it's longer, and it has a couple of modifications. I mean, it's a lot more difficult to put up and to maintain in the woods, and tricky to tune. And the maximum gain you get, they claim, is about 4.5 dB. Well, to me, that's not really worth it. that's just not enough to make it worth all the hassle. I'd rather spend a little extra time and get the antenna 30 feet higher and move it from 65 to 95 feet and choose a couple of pine trees that are really far away, which might take about the same effort, and I think would have better results. But I've got two projects that I intend to that are next on my bucket list here. One is I want to get one of those MFJ remote switchers so that I can run a low loss balanced line out to a central location away from the house, and then control and then run the antennas from there when I do my A/B testing, and that way I can get them away from stuff and away from the testing antennas. And the other thing I want to do is try a V-beam. They say if you have 2 or 3 wavelengths, which I could do on the higher frequencies, the first thing I want to do is put up a 20-meter beam pointed to Europe, maybe 3 wavelengths on a side, get it up 60, 70 feet, and that's something that I really want to pursue. I've never tried one, but it wouldn't be as good as a rotatable beam, but I've decided not to cut down all those trees. And also, one other thing. Right now I have 2 antennas, and usually I have 2 or 3. When I was doing a lot of 160, I would have my primary antenna be a dipole as high as I could get it, which would usually be, 70 feet-ish for a transmit, and then I receive on a beverage that would be 2,000 feet, maybe that would be 7 or 8 feet off the ground, and then it would go through a matching network and an amplifier, and that would be for receive. And I'd put off at least 2 of those because they're pretty directional, especially if you terminate them, they're bidirectional. And that works for 160. Everything else, I work on 2 antennas. That is a 160 or 75-meter dipole fed with open wire line for every band. That the first harmonic frequency, or for example, my 75-meter antenna that I have up, or my 160 antenna right now, works horribly on 75. So I have 2 antennas, and they're at right angles to each other to minimize interference. And I use the 160-meter antenna fed with open wire line all the way to the tuner. The open wire goes, there's no remote balun or anything, goes clear to the tuner. Only balun is 4 to 1 if it's in the tuner. It works for all bands except for 75. For that band, I have a resonant 75-meter dipole at about the same height as with coax. I don't like to use coax in that case, and because it's just so difficult to work 75 meters on a 160-meter dipole for some reason. I read, I forget the theory, you're feeding it at a high voltage node or a high current node or something like that, but it's really squirrely and tricky to tune, and your tuner will arc over on you, and it doesn't work. So, but 2 antennas is all I really need. One for 1/6, 100, that 240-some foot wire filled with open wire for every band except for 75, and that has a monoband 75-meter, however long that is, 67 feet or something like that. No, wait, that's not right. That's 40. No, 130-some feet. And that's all I need, those 3 antennas, if you include the beverage. But I am going to get a little more ambitious, and I'm going to try some phasing. I tried it a little bit before. I was getting some help from an amateur here on 40. His name is Al. He does a lot of that, and he knows a lot about it. But the one time I tried it, didn't work. I think it's because there's so many tree branches in between the antennas that I was trying to phase. So anyway, back to you. I'm getting too distracted from my darn cat. So if I sound distracted, I'm fighting off a cat. that wants to play. KC9VKV
Roger, Roger, Alan. Well, you know, it is whatever you find interesting as far as the antennas to try. You know, that's the thing about ham radio. It's certainly a big enough hobby that you can pursue. You know, whatever thoughts you might have as far as antennas. You know, you could spend your whole life working on one type of antenna. You know, so it's you know, whatever works and whatever you find works, and just incorporate that and maybe make certain changes to it, always looking for a better situation. Probably the most important aspect to any of it is to be able to accurately A/B test your convictions. You know, you have the one antenna and you have the other antenna, and you switch back and forth and see which one is consistently doing the better job. And then you know, if you have a third position on I use 6-position rotary switches a bunch for my stuff, so I can evaluate different antennas in a group, you know, and see which one is consistently. And there are some that do consistently outperform other antennas. So on my 10 meter, I have a 6-position rotary switch, and I'm just using 3 right now. On my VHF, I'm using a 6-position rotary switch for all my VHF Yagis. And then on my HF, I'm using a 989C antenna tuner, and I'm running the tuner on 80 meters, and then I go to a bypass and pick up a 6-position rotary switch for my other inverted V's for the other frequencies. So like I say, the ability to be able to A, B, C, D, or whatever, compare your antennas is a real good way to always try to make the best decision. And I seldom deactivate an antenna. I usually leave it for quite a few years as a known status, you know, that I can refer back to. It may not be the best, but it is a chronological reference to my progression, you know. So that way you can always keep track of where you're going, as opposed to getting rid of one antenna immediately for another one. You have nothing to compare actually the new antenna with, and that's like I say, 90% of it. Alan, I got to move along, sir. I appreciate the QSO, man. We've discussed quite a bit, and good talking at you, sir. Roger, Roger.
Yeah, good talking with you. Well, I'm not bedridden, but I've got a twisted ankle here. As I said, I'm in. It's the country, the land is so rugged that we have got lots of bear and all kinds of animals, but no deer, because the deer can't get up here. they don't try because it's just really rugged. And the problem is that I'm a 70-year-old man, and walking around and doing antenna work on that kind of terrain, I tend to injure myself, and I don't heal quickly at 70. And I don't climb at all. That's where brains come in. But there, you really have to have no wind and a lot of practice when you're flying in congested areas of branches. But yeah, I will let you go. We've discussed a lot of things. I enjoy antennas, and I try sometimes to use theory and the antenna books, but it seems like that sometimes will get you in the ballpark. Then you go from there, because there's so many variables that I mean, obviously you don't know where real Earth ground is. If you're on the side of a mountain, which part of my antennas are, and it's sloping 30 or 40 degrees. That makes a big difference, and I haven't seen any way to make a formula where the antenna, the train is really, really buried under a wire, and how do you put that in the formula? And then also the capacitive coupling is different if you've got pine trees or deciduous, and if they're wet or dry, and if there is kudzu climbing your ladder line, that changes things, especially when it's wet. Lots of variables. You said you keep your wires up. I'd be concerned about interaction. That's why I want to get a remote antenna switch, so I can get the antennas farther away and operate some of them from a remote position, because I am concerned about interaction, and I absolutely agree with you about usually the only way to really know what's going on is to A/B them in real time. Because a lot of people will come on and with a D5RV and say, man, I've worked 150 countries. This D5RV is a great antenna. But have they ever had it up at exactly the same height, oriented the same way, and far enough away from the reference antenna so there's no interaction as a dipole for that particular band, and then A/B them? Very few people have done that. They might be surprised how poorly D5RV works on some bands. That's just one example. So if you can do it, the main problem, I think, is having too many wires in the air and interaction. One thing I'll do is I have a couple of remote switches. I don't have one of those ones that I plan to buy where we can switch from, like 8 or 9 different antennas. I just have like a double pull, double throw remote. And what I'll sometimes do to see if there's interaction, at least I think it tells me, is I'll deliberately short the antenna right at the feed point, or I'll short the antenna to a wire that goes to ground. And if I do that on one of the antennas, see if it affects the other one in any way, the SWR or whatever. And if I do that, and the other antenna doesn't see those changes, then I conclude that I'm not getting interaction. I don't know if that's right or not, but it's the best I can do, because how far away do you have to have 275-meter dipoles if you can't get them completely at right angles? If they've got to be somewhat parallel. How far do you have to get them? Pretty far, I think. So that's a problem with a whole bunch of wires in the air. That's what makes it interesting. I just enjoyed it more when I was younger and could climb, but I didn't live in the woods then because I was working. Now that I'm retired and have time to do that stuff, I can't climb trees anymore, so that's the way it goes. Anyway, 73 is good talking to you. Your signal is consistently strong. By the way, I just wonder if you could describe your antenna and how much power. As I said, this is a flat top dipole, 160-meter dipole fed to a tuner with, it's not really open wire line. It's the wireman's window line, this 450 ohm stuff. So it's not true ladder line. And that's another project that's on the to-do list, is to make some homebrew stuff that would be less susceptible to being shorted with the coax that likes to climb stuff like that, and maybe space it 4 or 6 inches, and just with little plastic spacers, and just make some stuff. And that's another thing that would probably work better than the 450. Anyway, good talking to you, 73s, and again, could you tell me, and maybe you did, and it just slipped my mind, but running a dipole, I think, how high is it, how is it oriented to Asheville, and how are you running? I'm running, the rig is the Yaesu 3000, and the amp is an AL-80B, and I'm peak reading watt meter, only about 700 watts here. It's just over 700 peak. That's just the final. I think you want to go, and I should tend to do some things here, Jim. Good talking to you, and you've been consistently really strong. Of course, you're really close too. KC9VKV. This is W4NCQ.
Roger, Roger, Alan. We're running, like I say, that inverted V at about 40 feet, at about a 45-degree slope, and 1 to 1.01 SWR, and the radio is a Yaesu 990, and the amp is a SB220, and we're running just under a kilowatt on 40 meters. So, just FYI, you know, I do have that QSO-VLOG page, and I have recorded our conversation, so I'll probably be posting it in the next couple of days. If you go to YouTube and do a call letter search for Kilo Charlie 9 Victor Kilo Victor, that'll bring up the QSO-VLOG page, and right at the top of the page there's one that is a list that has about 140 QSO'S in it, and this one, when I finally get it posted, will be right at the top of that list, just under Art Bell. So there you go. If you get a chance, check her out. We'll say threes for now. Alan, you have yourself a real good day. This is Kilo Charlie 9 Victor Kilo Victor.
I'll do that. Do you have any things like sketches of antennas and that sort, or is it just audio recording?
No, it's just audio. Now, I just have posted my antenna farm, a video of my antenna farm. I've got about 35 different antennas around the hacienda there, so it is a farm of antennas. So you might find that one interesting. You can see just the thumbnail of that. That should be up towards the top in those QSO-VLOGs.
Okay, well, I'll do that. I enjoy watching some of the videos and some of the misinformation that the hams will put out there on something as simple as building a resonant dipole. How some hams get these weird ideas. I'm sure you've seen a lot of instructional videos put out by hams that you know some of the things they're saying is just wrong. A lot of enjoyment of picking those apart. And I'm sure if I tried to put up articles, people would poke holes in them also, because I'm not an electrical engineer, so I'm not big on theory. And antennas, as I mentioned before, there's so many variables that you can't measure or control. Sometimes theory doesn't help you except to get you in the ballpark, and you just got to do a lot of trial and error, and that's what makes it. It's what makes it fun. It seems like antennas and audio and amplifiers are about the only things left we can play with. Aren't many people that can build ham radio transceivers, you know, and so forth. They're just too complicated, and surface mount and all that, or even repair them for that matter of fact. But we can still play with antennas, and we can still try EQing audio. I'm just using I don't have any external EQ. I'm just using a 781 with the EQ that's in the Yaesu, and that's something that I need to adjust because I had to do a complete reset of the rig. It was doing something squirrely, and I thought I had all of my parameters recorded, and I had them recorded but not correctly. So I don't have all of the audio parameters set right. So the complaint I get now is I need more. My mic isn't bright enough. I need more highs, and so I've got to. I can't find the original list of parameters. I got to do a little playing around with another receiver. I use an 870 as kind of a reference listening. I listen on that and then record with sound recorder and then play it back and AV mic setting or EQ settings. So that's another thing we can play with. besides antennas. So 73s, and you have a great day. And I will check out the stuff that you've got on line there. You mentioned Bob Heil. Yeah, Ham Nation, I like that stuff. As a matter of fact, I want to use some of his ideas with the remote switching and testing antennas, putting a MSJ remote switcher in a waterproof container far away out of the woods. And there I can get some antennas completely isolated from other antennas. Anyway, will make things a little bit easier for me. That's a bunch of projects that I'll never complete the list before I die, but always have something to do, kind of thing. Anyways, Jim, good talking to you. And yeah, you did say inverted B. It's working great. I still say if you had a dipole at the same height as the top of the end as the inverted V, broadside to me, it'd be stronger. That's just my prejudice. I could be wrong. KC9 can't read KV because the cat so much glasses. Doggone it, my reading glasses. It's KC9VKV, I'm pretty sure. And W4NCQ. 73, enjoyed it.
Roger, Roger, Allen-W4NCQ that away, sir. Catch you later. It's KC9VKV, clear. This is Kilo Charlie 9 Victor Kilo Victor. KC9VKV calling CQ. CQ, CQ, CQ. KC9VKV calling CQ and listening.
KC9VKV W4NCQ again for a quick one.
Yeah, Roger.
Is this about the signal strength that I was at before?
Just a little bit under right now.
I forgot to switch the amp on. I was operating at 65 watts. Okay, now I have the amp on. Now I'm operating at 700. Did I have this amp off before?
Yes, you did, Alan. Operator error.
Oh, how did it change my signal?
Drastically.
Stronger.
Drastically.
Okay, what's my signal report now?
Well, like I say, I don't run my receiver like most folks. I can't give you S-meter reading, but you're 5.9 times 3.
Well, I'm not sure how to interpret that, but that I just looked over there. Well, actually, the cat came back. It didn't bring the pen back, but came back, and before he gets on my amp, because he likes to live up there, he checks to see if it's too hot for him. He put his paw up there and hopped right up, and I thought, well, that's not right. That amp should be too warm for him to jump up there, as long as I've been talking. And sure enough, I have been talking to you with the drive power, but now the amp is on, and now it is kicking up around 700, which is pretty much the way I always run it. So maybe the previous conversation would have been a little easier then. My audio probably didn't change, though, I guess. Anyway, I'll just go continue with CQing, and I'm gonna let this thing cool down and get on with my day. This is W4NCQ 73.
Roger, Roger, Alan. Well, I'll make sure this gets out in the end of our QSO there, so everybody can hear what you really sound like when you're operating the power. Oh, and now you are sounding to me as I was sounding to you all along. So anyway, yeah, it'll be in the post. 3's that way, Alan. Catch you later. KC9VKV.
Yeah, it's amazing how consistently strong you are, too. Very little QSP compared to the other stations I had been hearing, and quite strong. So I'm probably coming in pretty good, I can imagine, because you're running twice the power, but that's really not a big difference. It's all in the antenna, as you know. KC9VKV W4NCQ.